You are lying on your couch at 3 p.m. on a Sunday. There is nothing due, no deadline, no email waiting for a reply. But somewhere in your chest, a quiet panic is tightening its grip. You know what it is. You've felt it before. It's the feeling that if you are not producing, you are disappearing. But the real answer is far stranger. This is not laziness. It is not poor time management. It is not even really about productivity at all. What you are experiencing is a value system that has rewired your relationship with rest so thoroughly that slowing down now triggers the same internal alarm bells once reserved for actual danger. Your brain cannot tell the difference between being attacked and being unoccupied. And that is not a metaphor. It is a neurological fact with a century of psychological research behind it. Think about what happens when you try to rest. You sit down, you open your phone with no intention, and within 60 seconds your mind has generated a list of 5 things you should be doing instead. That email you forgot to send, that project you have been meaning to start, that skill you promised yourself you would learn this year. The guilt arrives before your shoulders have even relaxed. This is the core of toxic productivity. It is the belief that your self-worth is measured entirely by output, and that any moment not spent producing is a moment spent eroding who you are. Rest becomes guilt. Leisure becomes optimization. Your identity shrinks to a backlog of unfinished tasks, and you start treating your own life like a project that is perpetually behind schedule. The clinical psychologist Catherine Esquire has described this as a loop where being productive gives your brain a temporary dopamine hit and temporarily takes your mind off uncertainty, but the relief never lasts, so you go back for more, faster, harder, until the loop itself becomes the cage. But here is the part that makes this feel inescapable. There is a psychological mechanism operating under the surface that you have never been told about, and it explains why your brain will not let you rest even when you have earned it. In 1927, a Soviet psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik was sitting in a Viennese cafe when she noticed something strange. The waiters could effortlessly remember long, complex orders for tables that had not yet paid. Entrees, drinks, substitutions, special requests, all held perfectly in memory for multiple tables at once. But the moment a bill was settled, the entire order vanished from their minds. They could not recall a single item even when asked directly. Zeigarnik was fascinated and ran a series of experiments that confirmed something profound. The human brain keeps an open file on every unfinished task. Incomplete tasks maintain an active cognitive representation that intrudes on attention, generates intrusive thoughts, and resists being put down until the loop is closed, either through completion or through a concrete plan. Psychologists now call this the Zeigarnik Effect. And this, right here, is the engine underneath your inability to rest. Your brain is not rationally deciding that you should be working. It is being hijacked by a cognitive system that treats every unfinished task as an open wound. Every project you started and paused, every email you flagged for later, every goal you wrote down in January and never revisited, every skill you told yourself you would finally learn this year. Each one of these is not just sitting quietly on a to-do list somewhere. Each one is actively consuming cognitive bandwidth, whether you realize it or not. The Zeigarnik Effect means that your brain holds on to incomplete tasks far more tightly than completed ones, which is why you can finish an 8-hour workday and still feel, somehow, that you have not done enough. The completed tasks disappear from memory almost instantly. The unfinished ones scream. And in a culture that gives you infinite things to start and almost no permission to close, your brain is running an open-loop marathon it was never designed to run. This is where the research gets deeper, and where the real name for what you are experiencing comes into view. Sabine Sonnentag is a professor of work and organizational psychology at the University of Mannheim in Germany, and for over 2 decades she has studied a single question: Why do some people recover from work and others cannot? Her research identified a concept she calls psychological detachment, which means mentally disengaging from work during non-work time. Not just physically leaving the office, not just closing the laptop, actually stopping the mental replay of tasks, conversations, and anxieties. Her studies, including foundational work published with her colleague in 2005, have consistently shown that employees who achieve real psychological detachment during evenings and weekends report dramatically lower levels of burnout, greater life satisfaction, and fewer symptoms of psychological strain. And here is the counterintuitive finding that should stop you cold. These same detached employees are no less engaged or effective when they are actually at work. Rest does not steal from performance. Rest is what enables performance to continue. Psychological detachment is not laziness. It is a biological requirement that most high achievers have been trained to override. And the training worked so well that the override has become automatic. Now you can start to see the toxic architecture. You live in a world that generates more open loops than any generation before you. Your phone delivers an infinite feed of unfinished comparisons. Your inbox never hits zero. Your side projects multiply. Your social media suggests 1,000 versions of who you could be if you just worked a little harder. And underneath all of it, the Zeigarnik Effect is running silently, keeping every single incomplete thread alive in your cognitive background, generating the low-level anxiety you mistake for ambition. You think you are driven. You are actually being driven by a cognitive glitch that a psychologist discovered in a cafe nearly 100 years ago, and that the modern economy has optimized into a profit engine. This is the moment where the narrative usually tells you to rest more, to meditate, to set boundaries. And those things matter. But there is a deeper twist that almost nobody talks about. The most compelling evidence against hustle culture does not come from wellness research. It comes from the science of elite performance itself. Anders Ericsson, the psychologist whose research on deliberate practice was made famous by the 10,000-hour rule, documented something that gets conveniently omitted from every motivational poster. Even the most elite performers in the world, the violinists, the chess grandmasters, the Olympic athletes, can only sustain about 4 hours of true deliberate practice per day. 4 hours. Beyond that, performance degrades, injury risk rises, and the brain's capacity for deep focus collapses. Ericsson's research, published in 1993, was not a recommendation to work less. It was a descriptive fact about human cognitive limits. The greatest performers in history did not outwork their competition by grinding through exhaustion. They outworked them by resting more strategically, recovering faster, and treating downtime as part of the training protocol rather than its enemy. The 4-hour ceiling is not a weakness. It is the specification sheet for the human brain. You cannot exceed it by wanting it more. You can only break yourself trying. This is where the reframe lands with full force. You have been living inside a story that tells you rest is the absence of productivity. But the science says the opposite. Rest is the mechanism that makes productivity sustainable. Every hour you spend not working is not an hour lost. It is an hour your brain uses to consolidate memory, repair cognitive fatigue, and prepare the neural architecture for the next round of deep work. When you skip that step, you are not being disciplined. You are running on degraded hardware and calling it dedication. The guilt you feel when you rest is not a signal that you should be working. It is a learned emotional response that your nervous system has mistaken for a work ethic. And every time you obey it, you reinforce the wiring that makes rest feel unsafe. So what does this look like in your actual life? Here is where the modern mirror comes in. Toxic productivity does not just steal your weekends, it colonizes your hobbies. You used to read for pleasure. Now you read to be the kind of person who reads. You used to exercise to feel good. Now you track every metric and optimize every split. You used to cook because it was creative. Now you meal prep efficiently and post it on a story. Every domain of life that used to be its own reward has been absorbed into the productivity logic. Even your relationships start to carry a return on investment calculation. Is this conversation advancing something? Is this friendship useful? Is this evening worth it? You did not choose this. It happened gradually, the way a room gets dark when the sun sets slowly enough that your eyes never notice the transition. Until one day you look up and realize you are evaluating your own life like a quarterly earnings report, and it has stopped being funny. This is the most dangerous consequence of toxic productivity. It does not just exhaust you, it flattens you. It strips meaning from everything that cannot be measured, optimized, or monetized. The moments that make a life worth living, watching a bad movie with someone you love, sitting in a park with no agenda, laughing at something stupid until your stomach hurts, these become guilty pleasures in the most literal sense. Pleasures you have learned to feel guilty about. And when you feel guilty about joy, you have not just lost your boundaries, you have lost your compass. You no longer know what you want. You only know what you are supposed to be achieving. And those are not the same thing. They have not been the same thing for a long time. The research is unusually clear about what breaks this cycle, and it is simpler than you think. It is not about working less. It is about closing loops. The Zeigarnik Effect does not require you to complete everything you have started. It requires you to make a plan, a specific, concrete, written plan for when and how you will return to the task. That plan alone is often enough to satisfy the cognitive system and quiet the intrusive thoughts. Sonnentag's work on psychological detachment points to the same insight from a different angle. Detachment does not happen by accident. It requires a ritual, a deliberate transition between work mode and recovery mode. Something as small as a 10-minute walk after your last meeting, changing your clothes, or writing down the 3 things you will start with tomorrow. These are not productivity hacks. They are closure rituals that tell your brain the workday is over and open loops can wait. The twist is that the people who perform the best are not the ones who never stop. They are the ones who have learned to stop completely, cleanly, and without guilt. They detach. They close loops. They respect the 4-hour ceiling not as a limitation, but as a design constraint, the same way a bridge engineer respects the tensile strength of steel. You do not argue with physics. You build within it. And the physics of your brain says you cannot sustain deep work indefinitely. You can only cycle between effort and recovery. The people who ignore this cycle do not get more done. They get less done, feel worse about it, and burn out faster. The research could not be clearer on this point, and it has been clear for decades. So here is the one thing to try. Tonight, when you finish whatever you are working on, do not just close the laptop and carry the mental residue into your evening. Write down exactly 3 things you will start with tomorrow, and write down the specific time you will begin. Then close something. Physically close the laptop. Walk to another room. Change into different clothes. Do something that signals to your nervous system that the work chapter of the day has ended. It will feel strange at first. The guilt will surface. Your brain will generate a list of reasons this is irresponsible. Sit with it. Let it pass. The guilt is not a directive. It is an echo of a value system you did not choose and do not have to keep. The research says that when you treat recovery as part of the performance cycle instead of its enemy, you will not only feel better, you will actually produce better work, sustain it longer, and remember why you wanted to do any of this in the first place. Rest is not the absence of productivity. Rest is what makes productivity possible. And if you can learn to believe that in your body, and not just in your mind, you will have reclaimed something far more valuable than any to-do list you have ever completed. You will have reclaimed your own worth outside of your output. And that, in the end, is the only productivity that matters. You are lying on your couch at 3 p.m. on a Sunday. There is nothing due, no deadline, no email waiting for a reply. And now, finally, you know why that quiet panic was never really about the work at all.